Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here. My name is Mark Hyden, and I'm the National Advocacy Coordinator for conservatives concerned about the death penalty. We are a national network of conservatives and some libertarians who believe that the death penalty is inconsistent with our core values. I started this work after a stint with the National Rifle Association. I managed multiple GOP campaigns, and I even worked as a Republican legislative aide to the former Georgia Senate President pro tempore, Tommy Williams. But since I started this work, there have been numerous state-based conservatives concerned about the death penalty groups launching across the United States. But today, as a Georgia resident, I'm especially excited to announce the launch of the Georgia conservatives concerned about the death penalty. And I'm standing alongside many notable Georgia leaders, including a state representative, former Republican Party official, a think tank leader, and activists from across the state who all find the death penalty to be a violation of our principles of valuing life, promoting fiscal responsibility and limited government, while only supporting good government programs. The death penalty in its simplest form, it inherently and repeatedly risks innocent lives. Meanwhile, it costs far more than life without parole, and it's even led to tax increases right here in Georgia. It also gives an error-prone government an immense power over the people, but it fails to benefit society. It doesn't deter crime. We know this. We've seen the studies. It's also quite harmful on murder victims' family members because of the long, drawn-out, unsure process that they're forced to endure. Let's be honest with each other here. The death penalty has done little for Georgians. In fact, as a pro-life and fiscally conservative individual, I find the death penalty's costs and risks to just be unacceptable. So as such, we're here today to call on the state legislature to begin the process of re-examining the death penalty for what it is, a failed government program. With that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, conservative state representative Brett Harrell.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to thank you and the conservatives concerned about the death penalty for organizing today's event. I'm State Representative Brett Harrell. I am a fiscally conservative Republican of faith. I've represented Gwinnett County in the Georgia General Assembly for just over 6 years. I'll share with you a little bit this morning about my thoughts on the death penalty, both from that as a position of faith as well as a legislator. At the outset, let me be clear that the death penalty, I believe, is both constitutional and may be morally applied. That said, as a person of faith, I view the death penalty first from the standpoint of protecting the innocent rather than having a primary purpose of punishing the guilty. And with that in mind, we've evolved as a society in this nation and in this state to be able to protect the innocent through life without the ability of parole. Also, as a person of faith, my friends in the pro-life movement often use the Latin term imago Dei, meaning the image of God. And they argue that the image of God is present at the moment of conception, so we should do whatever possible to preserve life and to preserve the image of God. And as I pondered that, and you think throughout the life, even with someone that is a most heinous criminal, that's done the most repulsive and despicable thing you can imagine, as you ponder that, at what point is the imago Dei, at what point is the image of God removed from that terrible, terrible person's soul? And the answer is clear. It is not. And therefore, as a person of faith, again, life without parole becomes the alternative that protects society and preserves the image of God. As a fiscally conservative Republican, I am mindful of how we spend our taxpayers' dollars. And as previously mentioned, I'm sure will be mentioned again, the death penalty without fail has been proven across this nation, study after study, to be a more expensive alternative to life without the ability of parole. Death penalty inmates sit on death row often 10, 20, and sometimes 30 years, running up an exorbitant cost to taxpayers. And then finally, as someone that is skeptical of large government, I like to make sure that the government is as efficient and effective as small as possible. And we've seen repeatedly since the reinstitution of the death penalty in the 70s that people have been tried, convicted, sentenced to death row, and I believe 156 now have been exonerated, and including 6 from Georgia. So the government has failed to provide an efficient, effective, accurate system in that regard too. So again, as an individual from a faith perspective as well as a small government fiscal conservative perspective, I have concluded that life without parole is the proper choice, the correct choice that renders the death penalty unnecessary.
Good afternoon. My name is David Burge. I'm an attorney living here in Atlanta. I'm in private practice with one of the Atlanta law firms right now, and I'm an active Republican in Fulton County and in Georgia. I've served previously as chairman of the 5th Congressional District Republican Party, and in that capacity I was a member of the board of directors of the state of Georgia Republican Party. I was a delegate to the 2008 Republican National Convention, and I'm currently the Republican appointee to the Fulton County Election Board. I stand as a strong economic conservative. I like government to be as compact, efficient, and cost-effective as possible. And I've come to believe that the death penalty is none of those things. So that causes me to stand before you today as perhaps a rather unlikely death penalty opponent. My view is based on some personal experience that goes back several years. My first job out of law school was serving as a law clerk to a federal court of appeals judge here in Atlanta on the 11th Circuit. On my first day, the judge asked me if I would be the clerk willing to help him research the law on all the death penalty appeals that were coming before the court at that time. And initially I agreed. I was and still am a strong law and order conservative, and I was happy to take on that task. However, after the end of that year, I came to the view that the death penalty just could not be administered efficiently and effectively. Those cases just showed me the difficulty and challenges of doing it right, and I came to the view that if it couldn't be done right, it shouldn't be done at all when compared to the sentence of life without parole. There were two cases that really cemented this view that came up towards the end of my year as a law clerk. The judge called me in. He handed me two murder cases to look at for him. Both were almost identical. They involved drug dealers from the rural South that had been convicted, that had committed a murder during a drug deal that went bad. They were almost identical individuals. The facts were almost identical. Just really not much difference between them, except one big thing. One of these individuals had received a life sentence. The other one had received a death sentence. I spent an entire afternoon in the law library on the life sentence case, researching the issues that he raised in his appeal, presented my research to the judge, and let him issue his finding. I spent a month and a half working on that death penalty case. Again, very similar facts, and the difference between a day's worth of work and a month and a half for one law clerk on one case just showed to me the waste of time, money, and effort that the death penalty causes in the state. The high cost of death penalty is well documented. As Representative Harrell mentioned, the costs of a trial are astronomical. It costs 2 to 4 times the amount to conduct a death penalty trial as a conventional life without parole murder trial, wasting millions of dollars that could be gone to desperately short police and law enforcement budgets throughout our communities. The cost of appeals add millions more, as I found out based on my personal experience. And besides this waste of money, it's a waste of time and effort. Our law enforcement and judicial officials are strapped for time, and why are they spending so much time dealing with convicts that are already in prison when they could be focusing that time and energy on cases that involve crimes that are going on today? Georgia has led the way in criminal justice reform for the last 4 years. Governor Deal and the entire General Assembly should be commended for the efforts they've brought to streamline our criminal justice and parole and inmate reentry systems. And I think we need to apply those same smart, intelligent, conservative principles to a hard look at the death penalty and switch back to life without parole. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Lawrence, and Although I'm speaking today in a personal capacity, my official title is Chief Operating Officer of the Foundation for Economic Education. We are an educational group teaching students about free market ideas, but I'm here speaking as a Georgia native, an Emory University graduate, and a libertarian activist. In the name of the people of Georgia, 69 people have been put to death since 1976. Since this time last year, the government of the state of Georgia added another 9 people to this number executed, and that's the most executed by any state in 2016. That's 9 lives the state of Georgia ended last year, with every one of our names on the death certificate. Is this a fact that we're comfortable with? Not only is this a serious question about justice and about mercy, but it's also a serious question about trust and absolute certainty. Among the 156 total exonerations nationwide since 1973, 6 people who were awaiting execution here in Georgia have been cleared of all charges based on new evidence. That's 6 people whose lives were scheduled to be ended but for the new facts that were entered into their cases. Is the high possibility of a mistake in taking a life something each one of us in Georgia is comfortable living with? If we as conservatives and libertarians cannot trust the government to plan the economy, choose our health care, to run our schools well, or to censor our speech, why should we trust it to have a policy to end life, even for the most heinous of crimes? We have a duty to abolish the death penalty, which is the most tragic example of government overreach. I'm calling today on the Georgia General Assembly to seriously consider this true matter of life and death, because even one person put to death wrongly is too many. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Malfasanti, and I am the chairwoman of the Atlanta chapter of America's Future Foundation, but today I am speaking on behalf of myself. I stand here to call upon the General Assembly to reconsider its current stance and to abolish the death penalty in the state of Georgia. One could argue that it's cruel and unusual punishment due to the high number of botched executions. One could also cite the exorbitant cost associated with every death penalty case, costs that are higher for simply incarcerating a prisoner for the rest of their lives. But what really concerns me most is not the cruelty or the cost, but our very humanity. It's a hell of a thing to kill a man, and there is no taking it back. You had better be sure, but more importantly, you had better be right. There must be a flawless realization of justice. For the state to be able to kill someone and call it just requires a level of perfection and knowledge that is simply beyond the capability of human beings. A wrongfully incarcerated man may be set free, compensation paid, an attempt made to set things right. But a wrongfully executed man is still just as dead, and there is no way to even begin to make that whole. We are flawed creatures. We misremember, we misplace, we fumble and mismanage, fall prey to logical fallacies and cognitive bias. It's simply our natures, and there's no shame in it. But because of these and other flaws inherent to humanity, it is folly to allow the state made of men and women no better than you and me, to sanction death. It's a hell of a thing to kill a man, and there is no taking it back.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Jones. I'm speaking on behalf of myself today. Previously, I served as president of Athens Area Right to Life and of the University of Georgia Pro-Life. And the reason that I'm a conservative concerned about the death penalty is because I feel strongly that a government and a court system that has presided over the deaths of over 60 million children for just the crime of being inconvenient or unwanted, has forfeited all competency to mete out who should live and who must die. I've also been an attorney for over 11 years now, and I've practiced appellate law for indigent defendants. And in that system, I have seen incompetence. I have seen fellow attorneys who mean well and perhaps are competent, but just don't have the resources to properly defend their clients. And that adds a great deal of doubt to the death sentences that are handed out. And as it was said earlier, the death sentence can't be taken back. It can't, once it's executed, it can't be undone. And, I wasn't always against the death penalty. I'd thought about it for a long time until last year I went to a vigil for the execution of Joshua Bishop, who, while he was in prison, converted to the Catholic faith, was baptized by the Archbishop, and was a mentor and a leader for other inmates. And that's when I realized that because of the length of the appeals process, the person who is executed is not always or not usually the same person who committed the crime. And therefore, they're a completely different person, and therefore, there's no justice in that. And when I realized that, that's on the prison grounds there, I went to confession, and ever since then, I've been a conservative concerned about the death penalty, and I'm urging the General Assembly to begin work to re-examine it and to open a dialogue with the faith community, with the pro-life community, and the legal community to put an end to this process. It is not the business of man to extinguish a life that God has created and that God still loves. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Austin Paul. I am the immediate past chairman of the Mercer University College Republicans. I'm a junior at Mercer University, but today I'm here speaking on behalf of myself. As a matter of principle, I'm opposed to the death penalty. I think that the same government that my conservative friends and I, we complain about the Department of Motor Vehicles, we complain about the post office and their inefficiencies, but we're expecting the same government to carry out death sentences that have already been noted several times are completely permanent. We cannot reverse those decisions. I think that the taking of innocent life in any form is wrong, and in that case, even if it means that a guilty man gets to live, if we're saving one innocent life, that's good enough for me. As a matter of practicality, I think the evidence shows, and I'm a big proponent of evidence-based problem solving, and I think the science and the evidence shows that the death penalty is ineffective, it's expensive, and it's not a deterrent for crime. As a conservative, that bothers me. I want to see small, limited, and efficient government, and I want to make sure that we're saving the taxpayers' money at all times possible, and the evidence shows that we're not saving taxpayers any dollars. We're actually spending more money than we should be on death penalty cases and death row cases, and I think that's wrong as a conservative and someone that believes in limited government. So I'm calling on the state of Georgia to re-examine the death penalty and take a pragmatic approach to finding a way to make sure that that innocent people are not ending up on death row, and eventually I would like to see the death penalty abolished. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the largest portion of the press conference. I know we have a few members of the media, so if there's any follow-up questions, we'll be hanging out for a few more minutes. We have the room for a few more, so if you have any follow-up questions, we'll be mingling around. I know a few of us have to go back to work, so we'll be around, but thank you so much for being here.